The sound of champagne glasses still echoed in my ears when I felt her hand on my back. It was not a gentle touch. It was the weight of betrayal. My daughter-in-law leaned close enough for me to feel her breath, hot and sweet with the scent of victory. "Say hi to the sharks," she whispered, and then the world tilted. Cold, sharp, breath-stealing cold, swallowed me whole. Salt bit my tongue, the taste of panic filling my mouth. Silence roared in my ears. One heartbeat, I was above the ocean. The next, I was inside it. The sky vanished, replaced by blue chaos. My lungs begged for air, my heart for answers. And as I sank beneath the glittering reflection of their yacht, I saw them, my son, my only child, standing at the railing, watching. Not running, not shouting, just watching. Oh God. The shock stung worse than the salt. They thought I was gone for good. They thought the ocean would finish the work their greed began. But money does strange things to people. $3 billion can turn family into executioners, love into ledger lines. They wanted it all, the company, the estates, the future, and I was the final obstacle. The water clawed at me, pulling me under again, but I was not ready to die. Every kick, every gasp was a desperate promise whispered through the bubbles. I would not let my life end as their alibi. Minutes, or maybe seconds, later, a faint light cut through the fog. My heart leapt, wild and aching. A rough voice shouted through the storm, "Hold on!" A sob escaped me, half a laugh, half a cry, as calloused hands dragged me from the sea. When the captain asked what happened, his eyes full of disbelief, I choked out the truth no one sane would want to hear. "My family just tried to kill me." He stared, waiting for more. But revenge stories never begin with anger. They begin with survival. I needed silence, not sympathy. If anyone learned I was alive before I gathered proof, they would finish what they started, so I disappeared. To them, I was gone. A tragic accident filed neatly under elderly confusion. But while they planned my funeral, I was planning something else. Because when people show you how far they will go for money, you show them how far you will go for justice. And when they came home that evening, smiling, mourning, celebrating my death, I was already there. Waiting. What happened next turned a quiet mansion into a confession room. And it all began with that whisper on the yacht that was only the beginning. There was a time when mornings smelled like fresh coffee and peace. I would sit by the window of our lake house, the same one Robert and I built brick by brick, and watch the water catch the sunrise. It shimmered like everything in our life back then. Calm, golden, certain. My son David used to call every Sunday. "Mom, you still using that ancient phone?" He would joke, "Ha ha ha," laughing in that easy way that reminded me so much of his father. He had Robert's confidence, his quiet determination. I believed, foolishly, perhaps, that he had inherited his kindness too. When Robert passed, I lost the person who could read my thoughts with a glance. The silence of the house. It felt heavier than grief. Each creak of the floorboards echoed through my chest. David and his wife Vanessa became my family's anchor, or at least that is what I wanted to believe. They took care of everything, the funeral, the company matters, even my health after the hip surgery. Vanessa, with her perfect smile and perfect timing, always knew how to make people feel seen. She called me Mom in that polished tone that sounded warm, but never quite reached her eyes. I told myself, it was just her way. A little distant, a little formal. Love expresses itself differently across generations, I thought. Still, I tried to close the distance. I baked her favorite lemon cake when they visited. I offered advice when she asked, and silence when she did not. When they told me about their new yacht, I was genuinely happy for them. "You deserve it," I said with a proud smile. Robert would be proud. Sometimes, I wondered if I gave David too much too soon. After Robert's death, I signed over part of the company shares to him. A gesture of trust, my lawyer had called it. But I did not need documents to prove love. He was my son, my boy. What else was there to prove? Our last normal day together was a Tuesday. The air was clear, and the morning light fell across my kitchen like honey. I remember Vanessa calling that afternoon, cheerful as ever. "Mom, David wants to take you on a celebration cruise," she said, her voice full of excitement. "You're finally recovered. It will be just us three, like old times." I smiled without hesitation. Oh, I had missed them. The laughter, the closeness, the illusion of family. I imagined us clinking glasses, talking about life, remembering Robert. My heart lifted in a way it had not in years. That evening, I laid out my navy blue dress. The same one Robert used to say made me look 10 years younger. I stood before the mirror, touched the silver in my hair, and whispered softly, trembling. He would have loved this day. If I had looked closer at that reflection, maybe I would have noticed the sadness in my own eyes, the kind that comes before the storm. But that morning, all I saw was hope. And hope, I have learned, is often the last lie before betrayal. The ocean always tells the truth. Always. You can read it if you know how. The way waves change before a storm, or how the air feels heavier when something is about to break. I felt that same weight in David's voice long before that yacht ever left the shore. Something inside me whispered, "Something's wrong." It began with the small things. Missed calls, short replies. The way Vanessa's texts quietly replaced his. "David is in a meeting," she would write, even on weekends. That uneasy chill crept in every time her messages appeared instead of his voice. When we finally met for lunch one Sunday, he smiled too quickly and left too soon. "Work is crazy, Mom," he said, barely looking up from his phone. "Just trying to keep everything running." I wanted to believe him, I really did. But I had been married to a businessman for 40 years. I knew when numbers hid behind words. Vanessa filled the silence with her flawless voice, talking about luxury renovations and travel plans. "The Caribbean in December," she said brightly. "We might take the yacht down for a month. You must see it sometime." She sounded sweet, but her eyes kept drifting toward my pearl bracelet, Robert's last gift to me. I laughed softly, ha ha ha, trying to shake the discomfort away, but the moment stayed. That look. It was the same kind of smile I'd seen during board meetings, the smile of someone who already owned what they were admiring. Then came the paperwork. After my hip surgery, I was still foggy from medication when David arrived at the hospital with a neat stack of documents. "It's just temporary," he said gently, that familiar tone of reassurance. "Power of attorney. I'll handle bills while you rest." He kissed my forehead, and I smiled faintly. Oh, touched by his kindness, so I signed. I didn't even read the pages. My hands shook a little, but I trusted him. Oh, how foolish. Weeks later, I tried to contact my financial advisor. No answer, not once. My lawyer's secretary said he was traveling indefinitely. I remember sitting there, phone pressed to my ear, that cold rush of dread climbing up my spine. It felt like a breeze had swept through my life and rearranged everything when I wasn't looking. One night, unable to sleep, I opened my online banking account. My heart thudded, faster, louder, as I stared at the screen. Several familiar accounts were gone, consolidated, apparently, for simplicity. My own name appeared smaller, replaced by a joint ownership note I did not remember approving. When I confronted David about it, he laughed, a hollow, nervous laugh. "Mom, relax. You're still recovering. You must have forgotten what we discussed." The word forgotten hit like a drop of cold water sliding down my spine. Vanessa placed a gentle hand on my arm. "We just want to help you," she said softly. "You've been a little confused lately, that's all." Confused. That single word echoed inside my head like a closing door. Confused. A word that builds cages. That night, I sat awake by the window, staring at the dark water outside. The reflection in the glass did not look like me. It looked like someone fading, being erased one polite signature at a time. Somewhere between the phone calls, the documents, and the smiles, I had lost something I could not name. But I knew this much. Love does not need signatures. Control does. And in that heavy silence, my chest tight, my eyes wet, I realized my son's concern was not for my health. It was for my fortune. I just did not know yet how far he would go to claim it. The morning of the cruise glowed like a promise, soft light spilling across the water, the kind that makes you believe in good days again. The sky was flawless, the harbor calm, and David's voice unusually warm when he called. "Mom, bring that navy dress. Vanessa wants to take pictures for her blog," he said, laughing. Ha ha ha, as if laughter could erase months of silence and distance. I wanted to believe that this was his way of coming back, that maybe, just maybe, love could sound like laughter again. Oh. I ignored the unease blooming in my chest and told myself I was overthinking, that family meant forgiveness. When I reached the marina, their yacht shimmered like a slice of sunlight, too bright, too perfect. Vanessa stood at the deck waving, her gold bracelet flashing like a signal. "You look beautiful," she called out, her smile wide, her tone polished, practiced. David helped me aboard. His hands felt steady but cold. His embrace was brief, polite, distant, like a stranger rehearsing affection. "You'll love this trip," he said, voice a little too cheerful. "It's time we celebrated your recovery." For the first hour, everything felt almost normal. The sea stretched endless and forgiving. Vanessa poured champagne with a practiced grace, and David played Robert's favorite songs. My chest ached hearing them, and still, I smiled. I laughed softly, ha ha ha, trying to believe this peace was real. For a moment, I felt like a mother again, not a burden waiting to be signed away. But then David asked about my will. He did it casually, almost playfully, the way someone might ask about the weather. "Mom, have you thought about simplifying things? Probate can be such a nightmare," he said, refilling my glass, the golden liquid swirling like liquid deceit. Vanessa's phone was in her hand. She angled it toward me with a bright grin, pretending to take selfies. But the lens, it was pointed at my face. Something shifted inside me. A shiver ran through me, not from the wind, but from knowing, a subtle, invisible coldness, the kind that creeps in before lightning strikes. "Why the sudden interest?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. David smiled, but his eyes didn't move. "We just want to make sure everything is taken care of. You've been forgetful lately." Forgetful. Again. The words scraped against my heart like glass. I placed my glass down slowly, hands trembling. "I'd like to go back to shore," I said quietly. His jaw tightened. The warmth vanished. The mask cracked. "I'm afraid that's not possible, Mom," he said, voice soft but sharp as a blade. "We need to talk about your health and your memory issues." Vanessa stepped closer, her phone still raised, her expression calm. Too calm. "We have documentation," she said smoothly. "The doctors agree you're not capable of handling your affairs anymore." My pulse hammered. The world around me dimmed, sounds folding into the thud of my heart. The pieces clicked together, the hospital forms, the unanswered calls. The accounts changed for simplicity. They had built this moment brick by brick. My own child. My son. "David," I whispered, my throat tightening. "You cannot be serious." But the son I had raised, the boy who used to hold my hand when storms frightened him, he was gone. In his place stood a man who valued fortune over blood. When I refused to sign, Vanessa's voice turned almost tender, almost kind. "Accidents happen." "Margaret," she said softly, her smile curving cruelly, "especially at sea." A gasp escaped my lips. "No." "David, please." My voice cracked, trembling between disbelief and heartbreak. And before I could move, her hand pressed against my shoulder, firm, final. The world tilted, the horizon spun, and the water, cold, violent, merciless, rushed up to meet me. My breath shattered. My heart screamed, and the people I loved most stood above me, watching. As I disappeared beneath the waves, the ocean hit like a wall of knives, cold, sharp, merciless. It sliced through every inch of me, stole my breath, stole my reason. My body screamed to move, to fight, to live. Every instinct clawed inside me, begging to reach the surface that seemed so impossibly far away. When I finally broke through the waves, gasping, the air tore into my lungs like fire. The yacht, my son's yacht, was already shrinking into the horizon. My lungs burned, my throat ached, and my heart, oh my heart, that mother's heart, cracked open in a way it never had before. They were gone, my son and his wife. The last of my family. I kicked off my shoes and forced myself to float, trembling, teeth clattering. The salt stung my lips, the cold bit through my bones, and still. I refused to sink. I had learned to swim in this same ocean decades ago. Robert and I, ha 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 ha, we used to race along the shore, laughing like children, as if we could outrun the waves or outswim time itself. I could almost hear him now, steady, calm, his voice echoing through the chaos. Breathe, Margaret, think. So I did. I breathed, shaky, shallow, but I did. Panic would drown me faster than the water ever could. Logic, not emotion, was my lifeline now. I turned my body toward the faint sound of an engine, a deep, rough hum slicing through the wind. Hope flickered, fragile and small. The sound grew louder, closer until I saw it. A small fishing boat, weathered and slow, but alive. My pulse leapt. I raised my arm, shouting, my voice breaking again and again. "Help, please!" The air ripped at my throat, but I screamed anyway. The boat veered toward me, its light trembling through the mist. Two figures leaned over the railing, one older, one young. The older man's face came into view first, lined by years of sun and sea. He reached out, grabbed my wrist, and pulled with a strength that startled me. "Holy hell, lady, what happened to you?" I coughed out half the Atlantic, sputtering and gasping between sobs. "My family." My voice cracked, trembling through the cold. "They pushed me off a yacht." He blinked, disbelief flickering across his face. "You serious?" "Yes," I whispered hoarsely. "But you can't call anyone." "Not yet," his brow furrowed. "You need a hospital." "I need silence," I said firmly, my voice trembling but unbreakable. "If they find out I survived, they'll finish what they started." For a long moment, he just stared at me, really looked at me. Then he nodded once. "Name's Jake. You got guts, lady." He wrapped me in a coarse blanket that smelled of salt and motor oil. The rough fabric scraped my skin, but the warmth felt like mercy. His grandson, Tyler, maybe 16, kept glancing at me, wide-eyed, while steering the boat toward the shore. I sat there shaking, not just from the cold, but from the realization. They had planned everything. Every signature, every missing call, every lie. The hospital papers, the accounts, the false concern. All of it built perfectly, piece by piece, until it became a weapon. My own son had created a world where my death would seem merciful. The waves slapped against the hull, steady, rhythmic, cruelly calm, like a heartbeat that refused to stop. I closed my eyes and matched my breathing to it. Inhale, exhale, calm, focus, control. I was not done yet. When we reached a small private dock, Jake helped me ashore, his calloused hands steadying me as my knees threatened to give. "Easy there," he muttered. His voice was gruff but kind. "No one'll find you here," he said, leading me to a narrow cabin hidden behind the cliffs. "But if what you're saying's true, you've got a war coming." A shaky laugh slipped from me, half bitterness, half strength. "A war," I said softly. "Yes, I suppose I do." I looked out at the endless stretch of gray water, the same water that had almost claimed me, the same water that had revealed the truth. My reflection trembled on its surface, pale, exhausted, but alive. "I'm not fighting for revenge," I whispered. My voice cracked, my eyes burning. I'm fighting to reclaim my name. The woman who had gone overboard was gone. The one who rose from the ocean was someone else entirely. Colder, smarter, sharper. They thought they had buried me at sea. They were wrong. That was the moment I stopped being a victim and started becoming their reckoning. The cabin smelled of salt, coffee, and quiet determination. Jake's fishing boat had left me half drowned, half reborn, but the woman sitting at his small wooden table was no longer the victim from that yacht. She was a strategist now, sharpened by betrayal. Jake poured black coffee into a chipped mug and slid it toward me. "You sure you don't want the Coast Guard?" he asked again, his tone rough but kind. "No," I said, my voice steady even as my hands trembled. "I want proof." He studied me for a long moment, the kind of stare that measures a person's breaking point. Then he nodded slowly. "Then we do this your way." Outside, the storm softened into drizzle, the steady tapping against the window like a metronome for my thoughts. I wrapped my fingers around the warm mug and began retracing every step that led me here. Every word, every glance, every document they made me sign. My mind became a ledger of betrayal, and I intended to balance it to the last detail. First, I wrote names. My lawyer, my accountant, my financial advisor. All people who had suddenly gone silent. Their numbers still saved in my phone, their loyalty erased overnight. Then I wrote what I remembered from the hospital papers David had brought me. The logo, the ink color, the date. He had said they were temporary. My throat tightened. That signature I gave him might have opened every door to my fortune. Jake leaned over my notes, squinting at the messy scrawl. "You think they forged anything?" "I think they forged everything," I said quietly, my jaw tightening with each word. We needed eyes on the inside. Jake knew the docks better than anyone. He knew who talked, who drank, who listened. So he asked around the marina, quiet but precise. By nightfall, he returned with a lead, the yacht's deckhand. A young man who had suddenly been paid a very generous bonus to take a few days off right after the cruise. Ha ha ha, the kind of bonus guilt buys. That was no coincidence. The next morning, the air tasted like salt and secrets. Jake found him at a small diner near Gloucester. I stayed hidden in his truck, watching through a rain-streaked window, my pulse hammering. The smell of frying bacon mixed with fear. I could hear them clearly through the open window as Jake spoke. "You remember the Harrisons' yacht? The white one?" The deckhand looked up, eyes darting nervously toward the street. "Yeah?" he said slowly. "Why?" Jake's voice stayed calm. "You see anything unusual that day?" He hesitated. My fingers gripped the truck seat so tightly my knuckles turned white. Finally, the young man exhaled. "Just that Mrs. Harrison wasn't on board when they came back. The lady, Vanessa, said she slipped. But the husband, he looked wrong. Shaking, pale, like he'd seen a ghost. A silent tear slid down my cheek, disappearing into the collar of my coat. That was all I needed to hear. The lie had already begun spreading like oil on calm water. Back at the cabin, Jake placed an old radio scanner on the table, its knobs worn smooth from years of storms. "You said your son handles the finances through a firm downtown?" "Yes," I murmured. "Hargrove Investments." He tuned the device to a private frequency, his hands sure and steady. The static hissed, then softened into faint marine chatter. "If they take the yacht out again, we'll hear them." I looked out the fogged window toward the gray Atlantic, the sea that had taken my breath but not my will. Somewhere out there, my son and his wife were rewriting my story, painting me as the confused mother who wandered too close to the edge, who lost herself to age and water. But I was rewriting it too, in ink they could never erase. It was no longer about money. It was about truth. The next time I stepped onto that yacht, I promised myself I would not be the one thrown overboard. Days blurred into nights inside that small cabin, the kind of days that felt like they were stitched together with fog and silence. I slept in short fragments, jerking awake each time the wind shifted direction. Every creak of the wood sounded like footsteps. Every gust of air whispered my name. Jake would leave before dawn and return hours later with quiet updates, whispers from the docks, fragments of conversations between men who tied knots for a living, but untied secrets for the right person. Crew members who worked on expensive boats but kept their eyes down, their mouths half closed in fear. The story forming before me was darker than greed. It was orchestration, precise, deliberate, patient. Vanessa had not just married my son. She had studied him, every crack in his confidence, every insecurity he tried to hide, every fragile piece of pride he carried. Ah, my poor David. Somewhere between grief and inheritance, she had turned his hunger to prove himself into a weapon sharper than any knife. Jake spread the evidence across the table, his fingers rough, but careful. "Look at this," he muttered, sliding papers toward me. Copies of bank transfers, snippets of overheard dialogue, even a mechanic's shaky testimony that the yacht's security cameras had been temporarily disabled the very day I went overboard. I laughed bitterly. Ha ha ha! The sound breaking into something closer to a sob. "Temporarily disabled," I repeated. "How convenient." "They're smart," Jake said quietly, his voice heavy with grudging respect. "Everything looks legal on paper, but every move leaves a fingerprint." I traced one of the pages with my fingertip, following the lines like veins of deceit. Each receipt, each signature, was a breadcrumb leading back to them. But then I froze. There, on the power of attorney document, a third signature, one I didn't recognize. The initials, MT. Jake, leaned over my shoulder. "Who's that?" My mouth went dry. "Someone who never should have had access to my accounts," I said slowly. "My accountant's last name is Torres. But his wife, Miranda, she's a corporate lawyer." The name hit me like a whisper I had heard long ago and forgotten. Sharp, careful, deadly. I remembered meeting her once, her eyes so sharp they seemed to see through people. Her voice polite, silky. The kind of woman who could dismantle someone's life with a smile. And then the memory cut deeper, her question, her tone casual yet probing. "Do you ever worry about who will manage everything after you're gone?" Back then, I had laughed softly, ha 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 ha, thinking it was kindness, concern, compassion. But now it sounded like a survey. Jake leaned back in his chair, whistling low. "So your son, his wife, and this lawyer, they've been planning this together." "Planning," I echoed, my voice trembling with rage. "And perfecting." That night, the rain tapped against the cabin roof while I sat before the old computer Jake had rigged up. The screen flickered, the dial-up hum filling the silence. My obituary was already there, right on the front page of the local news. "Beloved mother and philanthropist lost tragically at sea." I stared, my stomach twisting. They had even chosen a photo. Me at David's birthday party, my face half lit, half lost, a drink in my hand, my smile distant. I remembered that day. They told me it was a quiet dinner. But when I walked in, 20 strangers, bright lights, a camera flashing. I had laughed then, embarrassed, not realizing they were collecting moments, not memories. Building a file to prove I was losing my mind. I scrolled through the comments, my eyes stinging. Hundreds of condolence messages, each one praising David and Vanessa for their strength. And there, beneath it all, a donation link. "In lieu of flowers, please support the Alzheimer's Association." It was perfect, elegant, cruel. Jake read over my shoulder and shook his head, his jaw tight. "They've buried you beautifully." A broken sound slipped from me, half a laugh, half a weeping sigh. "Yes," I whispered, tasting iron on my tongue. "But they forgot to close the coffin." The deeper I dug, the clearer it became. This was not just theft. It was a system, polished, practiced, and well-fed. A machine that had devoured others before me, turning grief into profit, trust into paperwork, love into leverage. And as I stared at my own obituary glowing on that flickering screen, I made a silent vow. I was going to expose every single name on it. Every smiling face behind that machine. No more signatures. No more silence. They had written my ending, Now I was going to rewrite theirs. I had died once already, at least on paper. That gave me a kind of freedom the living never have. They believed I was gone. And that illusion... Ha ha ha. That was my sharpest weapon. The first thing I did was let the lie breathe. Every headline, every sympathy post that mourned my memory loss, every sad little comment about the poor, confused widow, all of it worked in my favor. The more convincing their story became, the deeper I could move without being seen. Jake helped me set up a new phone under a false name and open a private bank account using cash he had stashed from years at sea. When he handed me the envelope, he chuckled, shaking his head. "Never thought I'd be funding a ghost," he said, grinning through his weathered beard. "Not a ghost," I corrected softly, my eyes burning with something sharp and alive. "A haunting." He laughed again. Ha ha ha, low and knowing. The plan was simple, but the execution had to be surgical. They wanted the world to see me as a confused old woman who drowned by accident. I would make them see something else entirely, a mother reborn with purpose. Step 1 was observation. Watch, listen, wait. Jake, with his fisherman's ease and his gift for blending into background noise, began visiting the marina where David kept the yacht. Just a man swapping stories about tides and tackle boxes, he learned quickly. They had already filed the insurance claim, so fast it made my stomach twist, and my lawyer, Patricia Walsh, had conveniently resigned 3 days after the so-called accident. How neat, how rehearsed. Step 2 was infiltration. Using an old contact Robert once trusted, an IT consultant named Morgan, I gained access to my digital archives. The screen's glow flickered over my hands as I scrolled through everything. Every email, every statement, every little lie disguised as business. The pattern pulsed like a heartbeat. Incremental withdrawals, cleverly disguised as expenses, all leading straight to offshore accounts in Vanessa's name. I sat back in the dark, a bitter laugh escaping my throat. Ha ha, they were so careful, so clever, but not clever enough. Step 3 was pressure. Quiet, invisible pressure that makes guilty people sweat before you even touch them. Jake delivered an anonymous letter to their mansion. A single sheet of paper, neat handwriting, 1 sentence. "The ocean remembers everything." When he told me later, I smiled for the first time in weeks. Oh. Poetic justice had a rhythm of its own. By that evening, the letter had already spread through local gossip circles. I could picture Vanessa's perfect smile cracking, her hands trembling as she read it again and again. That night, she called the marina twice, demanding extra security. David ordered new locks for the house. Oh, they were scared. Not of ghosts, but of exposure. For the first time since the yacht, I slept peacefully. The sea outside whispered, and this time it sounded like an ally. Over the next few days, Jake fed them more breadcrumbs, subtle, unnerving, perfect. A sighting report at a coastal diner. A missing item from my jewelry box mysteriously returned to their doorstep. A condolence wreath, white lilies and all, sent from Margaret. Each act hit like a wave, gentle but relentless. Vanessa's calm began to crumble. She stopped attending her charity events, her perfect social mask slipping. David, my son, my poor, broken boy, started glancing over his shoulder during every public appearance, his laughter too forced, his eyes too wide. The guilt was consuming them faster than justice ever could. And I let it. But fear was only the beginning. I needed evidence. Undeniable, irrefutable evidence strong enough to bury them legally, not just emotionally. Then came the whisper. Jake's friend at the marina overheard Vanessa talking about a meeting, a private one, with a woman named Miranda Torres. My pulse steadied. My chest tightened with both fury and focus. That was it. That was the missing link. The shadow behind the curtain. I looked out toward the gray horizon, my reflection flickering in the window glass. It was time to stop haunting them. It was time to expose them. Every trap needs bait. Mine was the truth, wrapped in silence, sharp, patient, waiting. For days, I gathered the fragments of their lies and wove them into a single, perfect plan. Miranda Torres, the lawyer whose cold initials haunted every forged document, she was the key. If I could bring her into the open, everything else would collapse like rotten wood under the weight of truth. Through Morgan, I discovered that Miranda's firm was arranging final estate transfers for David and Vanessa. Friday, 10 o'clock sharp. They would meet her to finalize the transfer of all my assets. The only thing missing from their paperwork was one signature, mine. A slow, bitter laugh escaped me, ha ha ha, because that was the moment I realized how poetic justice could be. I turned to Jake, my voice steady, my heart thrumming. I need to look like myself again. He smiled, that half grin that always meant trouble. You mean the woman they tried to bury? No, I said, feeling the fire rise in my chest. The woman who built the empire they're trying to steal. We spent the night preparing, the kind of quiet chaos that hums before a storm. Jake drove me through empty streets to a contact of Morgan's, a retired makeup artist who had once worked on local anchors. The smell of powder and old perfume filled the air. Her hands were gentle, her eyes sharp. She covered the bruises the ocean had painted on me, trimmed my hair, brushed it back with slow, sure strokes. When she finished, I barely recognized the reflection staring back. The woman in the mirror wasn't a ghost anymore. She was thunder. Jake's voice softened, almost almost reverent. Perfect, he said. You look exactly like someone who refuses to die. That morning, while David and Vanessa sat in a polished conference room signing my death into law, Jake was across the street in a borrowed delivery van. He had a small recording device tucked into his pocket, streaming every word, every smug laugh, every forged claim to an encrypted channel Morgan had secured. At precisely 11:45, the air shifted. A courier walked into the firm, shoes clicking on marble, and handed Miranda an envelope. Inside, my handwriting, my stationery, my heartbeat in ink. Dear David and Vanessa, reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. We need to talk. Love, Mom. Ha ha ha. Poetic didn't even begin to cover it. Jake watched from the van, breath held. Through the windshield, he saw them freeze. Miranda's face drained of color. David's hand began to shake, the pen slipping from his fingers. Vanessa leaned in close, whispering something sharp, her lips tight with panic. Her eyes flicked toward the door, wide and darting, as if she expected me to appear right there, dripping salt water and vengeance. I wasn't in the building. Not yet. But I wanted them to feel me, my shadow, my presence pressing down on their perfect world like the tide pulling back before it crashes. Minutes later, they stormed out of the office, their polished masks cracked, confusion spilling across every perfect line, and by the time they reached their car, another surprise waited. David's phone buzzed in his pocket. A notification. Motion detected in the living room. He froze. Vanessa grabbed his arm. That motion was me. I sat there, calm and unhurried, in the same armchair Robert had bought me for our 20th anniversary. My fingers traced the worn fabric, the faint scent of him still clinging to it. On the coffee table before me lay a folder, their folder, filled with every lie, every forged document, every receipt of betrayal. The house was silent, the curtains drawn, the air thick with the echo of everything they'd taken. For the first time since the ocean swallowed me, I felt still, whole. The setup was complete, and when they came home that evening, trembling, searching, pretending to still be in control, I would not be their victim. I would be their reckoning. The key turned in the lock at exactly 6:14 p.m. I did not move. The door opened, and their voices drifted inside, strained, hushed, brittle with fear. Vanessa spoke first, her tone high and shaking. David, it has to be a prank. No one survives that long in open water. Her heels clicked against the marble, sharp and nervous. David's voice followed, low, unsteady, almost breaking. Then who sent that letter? Who accessed the house cameras? They stepped into the living room and saw me. I was sitting in my favorite armchair, the one Robert bought me for our 20th anniversary. The same chair they had planned to replace once the house officially became theirs. I smiled, slow, calm, deliberate. "Hello, darlings," I said softly. "How was your meeting?" Vanessa screamed. Not a startled sound. No, it was pure, guttural horror, the kind that comes when the past claws its way out of the grave. David froze. His face drained of every trace of life, and the folder in his hand slipped from his trembling fingers to the floor with a dull thud. "You look like you've seen a ghost," I said, my tone almost amused. Ha ha ha, though my heart hammered like thunder. Mom," David stammered. His voice cracked. "This isn't, you can't, I can," I interrupted, my voice calm, steady, cutting through his panic. "And I am very much alive." "Surprised?" He swallowed hard, the sound loud in the silence. Vanessa took a step back, her hand trembling around her phone. This is impossible." "Impossible?" I tilted my head, my voice turning sharp as glass. "Like an elderly woman conveniently falling off a yacht while discussing her will?" Her mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes darted toward David, silently pleading. She had no words this time. On the coffee table sat a manila folder. I gestured toward it, a small, cold smile tugging at my lips. "I think you dropped something. Why don't you open it?" David hesitated, his breath uneven, then slowly leaned forward. His hands shook as he flipped it open. Inside were photographs, screenshots of forged documents, copies of bank transfers, Miranda Torres's emails, and at the very top, a recording transcript. "You recognize these, don't you?" I asked quietly. "It's amazing what a few friends and an ex-FBI consultant can dig up when you're presumed dead." Vanessa's voice cracked as she tried to speak. "You don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I cut in, my voice trembling now with rage and grief tangled together. "You used my recovery as an opportunity. You made me sign documents I couldn't see clearly. You doctored medical notes. You fabricated dementia reports. And when that wasn't enough, you tried to kill me." David's jaw tightened. "Mom, listen, we were desperate." Vanessa said, "Stop." My voice snapped like a whip. The sound echoed off the walls. "Do not blame her for the monster you chose to become." Silence. Heavy, suffocating. Just the ticking of Robert's old mantel clock filling the room, each tick slicing through the stillness, counting down the seconds to justice. Vanessa steadied herself, her voice trembling but cold. "You have no proof this holds up in court. Those papers mean nothing." I smiled, slow and steady. "Oh, sweetheart," I whispered. "You really should not have said that." I reached into my coat pocket and placed a small black recorder on the table. My hand didn't shake this time. "It's all here," I said softly. "Every word from your meeting this morning. Every forged signature you approved. Every plan you discussed with Miranda. You confessed on tape." Vanessa's breath hitched. "You're lying, am I?" I leaned forward and pressed play. The room filled with their own voices, calm, confident, criminal. Miranda's tone smooth and icy, reciting legal terms. David agreeing. Vanessa laughing faintly. Ha ha ha. A sound that now sliced through her like broken glass. Then, David's voice. Clear as water. "Once the transfers are complete, no one can prove she was ever competent." He collapsed into the couch, pale, shaking, the weight of his own words crushing him. I stood slowly, my shadow falling across them. "Here's what happens now," I said. "You will both call Miranda Torres and tell her to meet you here tonight. You will say there's been a problem with the paperwork. When she arrives, I'll be waiting. And so will my friends from the bureau." David looked up at me, eyes wet, his lips trembling. "What are you going to do, Mom?" My throat tightened, a single tear blurring my vision before I blinked it away. "I'm going to finish what you started," I said, my voice soft, breaking. "Except my version ends with the truth." The clock ticked once, sharp, final absolute. That night, when Miranda Torres arrived expecting to close a deal, she instead walked into a room full of agents, a furious mother, and the evidence she'd spent years burying. She tried to run. Oh, how she tried. But justice. Justice has a longer reach than greed, and for the first time in years, I exhaled without shaking. The confrontation was over. The reckoning had just begun. The house did not feel like a home anymore. It felt like a courtroom, quiet, hollow, echoing with everything that had been said and everything that could never be taken back. The night the FBI took Miranda Torres away, I stood by the same window where I had once waved goodbye to my son. Now, blue and red lights splashed across the glass, flashing across faces that once meant love, and now only whispered betrayal. The colors flickered like ghosts on the walls. David sat on the porch steps with his head buried in his hands. Vanessa clung to him, her body shaking, her sobs barely audible over the hum of engines outside. I should have felt satisfaction, maybe even victory. And for one short trembling moment, maybe I did. But justice is not as clean as people imagine. It does not erase what happened. It only writes the truth where the lies used to live. Inside, Agent Chen stood beside me, her expression soft but steady. "You've done something extraordinary, Mrs. Harrison," she said gently. "We've been tracking Torres for years. Your evidence will help us close more than a dozen cases." I nodded, though her words floated past me like mist. My gaze had already drifted to the fireplace. There, sleeping quietly in a carrier, was the baby. The child David and Vanessa had claimed as their own. A tiny breath, a small whimper. My throat tightened, my chest ached. That little soul was innocent of all this madness. Born from a surrogate who would never see the sunrise again. That child deserved a story that did not begin with greed. Weeks passed in fragments. Phone calls, statements, lawyers, flashbulbs. The legal battles began. David and Vanessa both pled guilty to conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder. Their names became headlines. The media called it the Harrison Air case. They wrote stories about me too. The billionaire mother who outsmarted her killers. The word sounded almost ridiculous. There was no glory in any of it. Only exhaustion. Only relief. Only silence heavy enough to fill an ocean. Jake went back to his boat, whistling softly as if to wash away the ghosts. Morgan quietly closed the accounts we had opened in secret, his usual confidence replaced with quiet gratitude. Mrs. Chen from the harbor stopped by once, bringing a pot of soup that smelled like home. She smiled as she handed it to me. "You won," she whispered. I laughed then, a broken, trembling laugh that cracked into weeping halfway through. "Did I?" I whispered back, because it did not feel like winning. It felt like surviving, barely. The mansion stayed sealed for months, crime scene tape, dust, and echoes. When I finally returned, the air was still. The armchair where I had faced them sat empty, faintly outlined by sunlight. I touched the back of it and felt Robert's presence, faint but real. My knees weakened and I sank into the seat. The silence pressed against me like the tide, soft and endless. I closed my eyes and let it wrap around me. They had taken everything they could touch: money, reputation, trust. But they could not take the one thing they never understood: resilience. I had drowned once. I had risen twice, and somewhere in that fragile space between grief and justice, I finally found something that felt like peace. It has been 5 years since the ocean tried to claim me, and the world still calls me the woman who came back from the dead. Sometimes I laugh softly at that. Because survival, I have learned, is not about cheating death. It is about choosing what to live for after you have already met. If the fortune that nearly destroyed my family now funds something Robert would have been proud of, a foundation that protects the elderly from financial exploitation. Every file I open, every story I read feels like a mirror. New names, same betrayals, different oceans. The patterns never really change, do they? The court sentenced David and Vanessa to 25 and 20 years. I sat quietly in the back row, the courtroom heavy with whispers. When the judge asked if I wanted to speak, I stood, my heart trembling but my voice steady. I said only this: I forgive you, but I will never forget what you taught me. And I meant it, because forgiveness is not weakness. It is freedom, the kind that untangles your soul, the kind that lets you move forward without dragging the dead weight of hate behind you. The baby they bought, little Robert Sarah, named for the grandfather and the young mother whose life was stolen, lives with me now. He is 5, bright-eyed, curious, and kind. His laughter fills the house like sunshine. Sometimes he runs into my arms, his giggles bubbling out, ha ha ha, and I feel my heart heal one piece at a time. He asks me questions that twist my chest in ways I cannot explain. Grandma, were my parents bad people? I pause, my throat tightening. Then I tell him the truth, gently. They made bad choices, my love. But you don't have to repeat them. He smiles, soft and untroubled. And I see in him everything they lost. The chance to love something more than money. The chance to choose kindness over greed. Sometimes, late at night, I sit by the same window where I once waited for David's calls. The ocean still shimmers under the moon, quiet, endless, forgiving. But I no longer fear it. It taught me what people never could, that the surface may change, but the depths always remember. If I close my eyes, I can almost hear Robert's voice in the waves, that familiar warmth, that teasing tone. You did it, Margaret. You found your way back. A tear slips down my cheek and I smile. Yes, my love, I whisper into the dark. I did. Not for revenge. Not for pride. But for truth. Because in the end, justice does not shout. It arrives in whispers. It looks like peace. It sounds like silence. It feels like breathing again after years of drowning. So tell me, if the people you loved most tried to destroy you, would you let the water take you? Or would you rise too?